Okay, President Joyce, we're all set.
All right, thank you. Welcome back from lunch. Now we will review and discuss public feedback received mailing in A2 and A3 regarding proposed drug compounding rules with staff member Efremov.
Wait 1 minute while staff member Melvin is able to get everything oriented and pulled out for the public and the board.
Did we need 18?
Oh, yes, if you could, you just need to do A3 is the mailing, right?
Yes. Maybe you should state that. I'm not going to open up the comments, but you are going to talk about them.
All right.
Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. To orient the board and the public, the Drug Compounding Division rules for Division 6, 41, 43, and 183 is mailing A3, and the public feedback comments received is mailing A2. We will be reviewing the proposed compounding rules with the latest edits made from comments received from public feedback and discuss the public comment feedback further to see if the board would like to make any additional changes to rules. For the format for Division 183, we will continue as we have, reviewing in the clean format since the majority of the overhaul was a structural change and this is a new division. So this means the whole division of 183 is bolded, underlined, and new additions that are changed since last meeting are going to be highlighted in yellow. Division 6 has yellow highlighted sections for changes that occurred since last review, and Division 41 and 43 have no changes that have occurred since last review, but do have yellow highlights that reflect proposed changes from the current rules. We've also noticed that staff has updated the rule numbers, and at the end of the rules is Division 45, which will need to be repealed if and when Division 183 is adopted. Language that is proposed to be removed has been struck through. So staff would like to start off and give a huge thank you to everyone who provided feedback. We received 62 comments with many detailed and thoughtful communications. We greatly appreciate the time and energy that everyone put into this process. I think it might be best to go through each section of rules and address comments in that section, so for ease of application, as addressing feedback with review of the proposed regulations will help aid in deliberate discussions that may be more readily followed by the public. Staff has carefully read through all of the considerations and made edits to reflect that in rule with those suggested changes. We will go through the rules by sections to address what was raised, highlight what has been changed, and request board discussion. We'll continue our standard rule review process. I'll lead around robin for each section to allow board members, including board president, to focus on input. After everyone is given an opportunity to speak, I will then ask for further thoughts, comments, or input from any board member prior to moving on to the next section. In an effort to be mindful of those joining us virtually, I will try to ensure that only one person speaks at a time so that the conversation can be clearly heard, excuse me. And please don't forget to lean in and use your microphones when speaking. So let's begin our review. So for applicability, this is OAR 855-183-0001. I'm going to apologize. I want to first also introduce our subject matter expert, Natalie Gustafson. She's going to be here to help answer questions too and is up throughout this whole process. We greatly appreciate all of her expertise input. So moving on to applicability. So for this section, there are only two small changes that staff has proposed. One is in paren 3 to ensure we are using the correct standard adopted by reference date that we update every April. So you've already heard that part of the process. And the second is for paren 4, lowercase b, capital B, the spelling out of BUD. Thank you to the super reviewer that pointed this out. We did not define this in rule previously or after. So then moving on to general comments we had received. So wanted to take some time, and as we previously noted, we are greatly appreciative to all the feedback that was provided, and it would be a great opportunity for board members and board staff to be able to clarify and address some of the comments that were provided. So paren 3, we received many comments regarding 503B outsourcing facilities. As we've stated previously in our discussions for this division, 183 for compounding would not apply to 503B outsourcing facilities. We are aware We need to create registration type and division for outsourcing facilities only, but currently we require outsourcing facilities to register as manufacturers. It's important to note the difference between 503B outsourcing facilities and 503A compounding. We received a lot of great feedback and comments related to that. 503B outsourcing facilities are specialized FDA registered compounders that was created in 2013, the Drug Quality and Security Act, to bridge the gap between pharmacy compounding and drug manufacturing. They typically compound large batches and can do patient-specific or non-patient specific and can address situations like drug shortages more nimbly. These facilities must comply with rigorous current good manufacturing practice standards, unlike 503A pharmacies, who may only dispense patient-specific and do not have to follow CGMP, though they have to follow many other federal restrictions and requirements to be applicable to be considered a 503A compounder. So we also received a few comments or questions related to if an outlet would have to notify the board when they're selling compounded medication that they received from a 503B outsourcing facility. It is our understanding that if a pharmacy or drug outlet itself is not compounding, they would not need to follow these rules. But of course, they would have to follow all applicable state and federal laws and rules that correspond to their practice. Moving on to Paren 4, we received a few comments regarding magic mouthwash and mixing 2 or more conventionally manufactured creams, and that this should not be considered compounding. I just wanted to make clear too that the board is not banning magic mouthwash, and the compounding of magic mouthwash is permitted, but that it is considered compounding. And the same goes for 2 conventionally manufactured creams outside of FDA approved labeling. The board has proposed, like the majority of states, to be in alignment with USP standards. The USP standards were created by experts in the field of compounding practice. They have similar process as the board relating to researching information, including subject matter experts, taking public comment, and adjusting where applicable to create those safety standards for compounding. We also received several comments on first compounding kits. It's important to note that these first kits are not FDA approved. And so reconstitution or mixing would not apply to these products. The preparation of these products is considered compounding, and they are not FDA approved products for FDA approved labeling. So this is clearly communicated on the first products website themselves and the actual products and the FDA website. This would not be considered compounding when using these products per the FDA or USP. So to clarify, in Paren 4, Paren A of this rule would not apply to first kits, and the FDA approved labeling is really the key component to this definition of what is not compounding. It's also important and critical to remember that in OAR 183, I'm missing some numbers there, sorry, down below in 0015 Paren 5, that there is a requirement to comply with all state and federal laws also embedded within this rules. And the last comment I wanted to address is that we did receive comments related to Paren 4D being a carve out that allows flavoring to be an exception from compounding, and that this is a direct conflict with USP standards. That is correct. It is, but Oregon has a state law that permits the addition of flavoring under these specified conditions to not be considered compounding in Oregon. So an entity can decide how you would like to proceed in that direction, but it is legally permitted for this to not be compounding in the state of Oregon. And I apologize, there was one other comment that we wanted to address in this section. There were many comments raised about 503A compounding and wanting to have more specificity or clarifying what is the allotted amounts permitted for compounding as a 503A. And staff just wanted to highlight that this is articulated in 21 USC 353A. And there really is, from the board's perspective, not a need at this time to further articulate that in rules, as we just identified in 855-183-0015 Paren 5, that there's the requirement to comply with all state and federal laws. So with that, there is the clarity of defining what is an essential copy already in the 21 CFR 353A Paren B Paren 2, so that if someone is complying with the other citations in this section of rules, that would require them to comply with federal citations. Thus, there's not the need to further expound upon that or specify. But obviously, if the board would like to, you may. So with that, I want to pause and do a round robin first to get board member feedback and comment, and then we can open it up for further discussion. Board member Joyce, would you like to start? Or
Sure.
President Joyce?
Or President Joyce, is it clear on our website, information regarding the, outsourcing pharmacies, compounded, GLP-1s? Because I mean, there were several comments regarding that. Is it clear our position or, where, we can, inform, the Oregon public, what the Oregon Board of Pharmacy does to protect Oregonians, in regards to, the use of compounded, outsourced, medications like GLP-1s. I know that we had last year around this time, we had a statement that we put out about the shortages of, GLP-1s and the need for compounding, et cetera. But if someone from the public, wanted to just look to see, what our position was on that, is it clear on our website, or can they find out that information, or like on the main page?
Position statement.
Yeah, so staff member Ekman, under position statements,
It's the
it's
first
where
one.
all of that information of what the board has communicated would live on the website. And I do believe there was two different communications that might have happened, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought it was one about the shortage and the FDA's allotment to expand that time frame, and then the other was the clarification of when you could no longer, when the FDA was ending that allotment for others to be compounding those drugs due to the shortages.
I believe it was May 2025, I think.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to make sure, like, that information isn't hard to find. Yeah, I mean, that generally, from the, reviewing the comments, there was a lot of, comments regarding that and the magic mouthwash, like you mentioned. But, other than that, I don't have any concerns, really.
Vice President Kirkbride.
Yeah, so just think, maybe just more of an education thing. I think there was a lot of confusion about, we kind of started out this section by restating that you need to have some sort of facility license. So you either are having a drug outlet license or you're gonna have a manufacturer license. And it appears that maybe created some confusion or maybe mistaken thought that we're asking for an additional license for compounding. And so I think because we restated that here in this section, I think we just need to, as we are educating about these new rules, just make really clear that we are not asking for an additional license on top of your primary outlet license. I was wondering, there was a comment that about what if you are both of those things? And I was wondering what you thought about that, because you said these rules don't apply to someone who is registered at, using the 503B as a manufacturer. Do you think that's a thing, that someone is both operating as a direct outlet and a manufacturer? And is it a simple answer that you would just simply have both of those licenses already?
So a place can't, this is Sweet Gustafson. So a place can be registered as a 503A and 503B. They do have to be separate physical. They can be within the same building, but you do have to have separation. You have to be very clear when you're making products on, one end versus the other, because one is dispensing directly, one is office use, right?
Gotcha.
And they have different rules for like CGMP and that kind of thing. So if you were both, you would have to register as a 503A with the board, but you would also have to register as a 503B as a manufacturer. Yeah, so you'd have two.
The simple answer is you would have each of those licenses, and then you would be following those separate rules separately.
And as staff member from up, I think further part of some of the clarification too is the uniqueness of the requirements that outsourcing facilities have under federal regulations that aren't necessarily accounted for clearly in our manufacturing regulations. So being able to have all of that clearly updated would help, I think also.
And then I just want to make sure I heard you clearly, the references to the reconstitution kits, that is compounding. So we are considering that compounding, okay? Because they are not FDA approved products. The last question I had, there was one comment that maybe there was potential confusion around for parent B conventionally manufactured sterile products. And if we thought that was clearly stated or if we needed to do anything around that statement. Someone had mentioned that they thought maybe we had a different definition of conventionally prepared or manufactured sterile products that they had. So I wonder what your thoughts were on that, if you saw that comment.
Staff member Fropp, yes, I think there was also maybe some questions on what exactly that is. I'm trying to pull up, let's see, E and B. So yes, I think part of it too is keeping into context all of B, that B is A and little b too. So some of the comments I think were that I believe that this is what is indicated in USP, but we also are pulling this together to make it kind of all in one section for clarity of others. And I think there was some confusion on what exactly this is. So maybe an example would be like what am I trying to think of?
I thought of like a flu shot. Yeah,
Yes,
like a
that was
secret,
like- and I think
exactly.
people might get a little confused on, so like if it's just for a single dose for an individual patient, my reading of that is that it felt like to me that maybe when someone was reading this, they didn't quite identify that it's the full section, right? It's preparing a conventionally manufactured sterile product in accordance with the directions in the manufacturer's FDA approved labeling when the product is for a single dose for an individual patient, and B, the labeling includes the information for the diluent, the resultant strength, and the container closure system, and the beyond use state. So I think from my purpose, I feel like it's fairly clear. Again, I'm way too close to this, and this was, it did go through the work group previously. So up to the board, though, if you think there's better language to clarify.
I mean, I also felt like it was pretty clear, and I do think there was maybe a bit of that in the way we structured the survey, that it came across in pieces, and maybe as people progressed through the survey, they were able to connect some of those dots a little bit more. So yeah, that was all the questions I had. Thank you.
Member Patel?
Board Member Patel, no, I have no comments in this section. It's no further comments.
Thank you. Board Member Smith?
And no further comments at this time.
Board Member Kroger?
Board Member Kroger, just a question for pair 2. So any person blah, 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 must register. People don't register, people are licensed. And is this inadvertently saying that any person, whether they're in state or out of state, must be licensed with the board as opposed to the entity only having the PIC licensed? So to me, it's one, we're saying a person must register, but a person must be licensed, or an entity must be licensed in conformance with our laws. I think it's, our noun matching isn't working for me in this particular sentence.
Staff member Fluff, I see what you're saying, and I think typically maybe trying to remember if this was part of what was previous language that kind of got brought from 45, and don't forget corporations are people too. I hear what you're saying, because we do say including any business entity that could lead one to deduce that that means in addition to, as opposed to this is what we actually mean. Do you have suggestions of what might be clear?
I just think like that, the confusion of the like, hey, I have to like have an additional registration to compound as a person, right? Like if I'm a pharmacist, even in state in Oregon, do I need some sort of separate registration to participate in compounding? Yeah. As opposed to I'm licensed I'm working at a facility that has appropriately notified the board in when there's instances that we need to notify the board. So I think, I don't know if, I guess and I also want to make sure that we're not unintentionally asking every non-resident pharmacist who is working for an appropriately registered facility to also obtain Oregon state licensure. So no, I don't have a suggestion on how to reword that because I think there's a couple things going on with this, and thank you for, I'm sorry I didn't notice this earlier.
I think this is a great conversation, and thinking back, and I think someone might have confirmed over here, it is statutorial language, I think is probably why part of that gets kind of an old timey vibe to it.
No, I did not say extension.
It's
I
not-
think it's in
It's in the
current
rule that
law.
way.
It's in
It's in
45.
current. Okay, perfect. I think that it does come from statute, some of it.
I didn't. like-
Would our board council be able to weigh in on any suggestions or maybe something just to think as we go around, to see if others have the same feeling? But it does appear that we got several comments about some of the licensure and who needs to be registered, and maybe that did come from this. I didn't look at it or see it that way, but I could see how that connects now that board member Kroger's raised that. Is there other language that we could say?
Without having like the statute language in front of me, obviously we don't want to be in conflict with that, but to me, it's just saying, I mean, the intent is saying like, you have to be registered or licensed appropriately here, right, to perform any of.
Well, actually, it's saying that you must register with the board of the drug outlet. So it's not talking about any
Wait,
individual.
Angie, can you use your microphone, please?
It's not talking about any individual registration. It's talking about you have to register with the board of the drug outlet.
So any person must register as a drug outlet.
Right, there's a word basically means if you're a person, if you're gonna register now that you're really a business, corporation.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably it wasn't saying like, so it's reminding you if you're gonna compound, have to be registered as a drug outlet.
We say any entity or facility located in or outside Oregon that engages in practice of compounding for drugs, like would that still satisfy that and maybe cause less confusion, or is there other unintended
I
consequences?
guess maybe my thoughts are, I think like the comments that were brought up, I thought I saw another comment that like, some of this is already addressed in other rule, like to be able to provide any product, whether it's compounded or not, to people here in Oregon, you have to be licensed or registered appropriately. Is this needed here? Because is that why it's causing confusion? Because it's making it seem like you need something other than your drug outlet registration potentially, because we have it repeated here. Like, to me, if you're going to be doing anything here in the state of Oregon, I think we've made it clear in other parts of our rule language that, yeah, you need to have a drug outlet registration in order to do that. Or whatever appropriate registration to come into our state. So I just don't know if this is needed at all. I get we're trying to emphasize that compounding is not some special other part of the practice of pharmacy. We're putting guardrails around it, but it is still ultimately a prescription to a patient, and it's got to follow all the other rules that apply.
Yeah. Staff member Efremov, I think that's a valid point. Maybe we can continue around with everyone and then we can revisit this and see how others feel also. Board member Chin?
Thank you. I had nothing to add.
Board member Hall?
Just about number 2 that we were talking about. I mean, I don't know, can we just say any business entity or any entity? I don't know. And then my other comment was just, I thought I saw a comment about that same section where it says the drug for dispensing, delivery, or distribution. I thought there was a comment about wanting to add for use or administration. I don't know if that talked about that.
Staff member Efremov, I did look into this a little bit further, and I think the one key point that we need to make sure we stay within our scope of is that per statute, our authority is for drugs for dispensed delivery and distribution. And I think one thing that's important to keep in mind too is to look at the statutorial definitions of dispensing, delivery, and distribution, and that administration and other components of the practice all are incorporated within that. But we don't necessarily have jurisdiction over individuals that aren't under your jurisdiction. So if a doctor is compounding at a clinic that is their practice and they are administering and not dispensing, that don't meet the dispensing drug practitioner outlet requirements, we would not have authority over that. And it felt like some of that comment might have been leaning into that, which I understand that USP does talk, that USP applies to all practitioners, veterinarians, pharmacists, everyone, but we don't necessarily have a jurisdiction for that. So we just wanted to make sure that we were trying to stay within our lane, but we do understand that that we just use maybe doesn't add any clarification, though it might, maybe that this conversation would be helpful in that alone to understand that administration and others are within those definitions already, if that's helpful.
Wonderful, thank you. No, no other comments.
Board Member Benito?
Board Member Pinedo, I have nothing to add at this time.
Then maybe we could ask a follow-up question related to if paren 2 is needed. So I do understand, I'm trying to think back of, we could do a quick cross-reference if we take a break and double check this, but I would assume that every registration division has a requirement to register within that. Thus, this is trying to articulate that you have to be registered, but it's also saying that you need to go to those other regulations and follow those. And is this really adding anything here? And again, this is something that maybe wasn't contemplated in this lens, as staff member Melvin has confirmed. This was in Division 45, is in Division 45 currently, so maybe it was kind of just a pull from and stick into this section 2 to continue for posterity or whatever. But perhaps maybe the discussion of, is this really needed? And maybe we could just go around and get some board members' feelings if you feel strongly one way or another, or could think of a reason why this would be really good to keep or not to keep. Board President Joyce.
Board President Joyce, well, there are definitely comments on, avoiding redundancy. And comments like, this is already mentioned here, why is it here? But in this particular instance, I don't see that, removing it would make much of a difference, or leaving it here, I should say. I don't have any strong opinions. I think we should just leave it. I'm leaning towards that.
Okay. Member Kirkbride, Vice President Kirkbride.
I think if you're talking about removing 2 and then you leave 3 as kind of an orphan, that's a little weird. So I think either you leave them both or you remove them both, and it seems like maybe 3 is adding some clarity. 2 maybe a little duplicative. I'd have to look and see like where it is referenced elsewhere. I think we can probably accomplish it with, education, and once people see the rules kind of all in one set, and they also see the rules that are repealed. I think that's also part of the issue, is they're looking at the old rules and the new rules at the same time, and sometimes thinking that they were coinciding.
Just for clarification, are you recommending we keep them so that 3 can stay maintained?
Yes, I think overall keep.
Remember Patel?
Patel, actually, I did not even notice that, it will create confusion, but it seems like create some confusion in the licensee. I guess I can go either way. If you want to, if we delete, or if we keep it, but a little bit wording is different, but I don't know how we are going to word it different. So I think I'm fine either way. If you keep it or if you delete it, yeah.
Board Member Smith?
Board Member Smith, I think we should keep it the way it is. Thank you.
Member Kruger, I was poking around in the rules for other examples of similar language, and under our charitable pharmacy, there's a line that says a facility may not operate as a charitable pharmacy unless it's registered as such with the board and has paid the fee in Division 110. So I don't know if we can just reword this similar to that. You cannot, perform the activities of compounding unless registered as such, or, you know, registered as a drug outlet with the board. I think the biggest piece that I'm hung up on is any person, you know, it's conflating like to me, it's confusing individual licensure requirements versus entity or facilities registration requirements as a drug outlet.
Step member off now that, thank you, board member Kirkbride, for pointing out paren 3. Could we just mirror what paren 3 is then and just say entities located in or outside? And mirror that
Yeah,
language?
yeah, that would be
efficient.
That probably would be fine by me, but.
Thank you for doing that research. Board member Chin?
Member Chin was going to, because board member, Paul had already said, why don't you just call everything an entity? So I think any entity located in or outside Oregon makes more sense and leave it in.
Do you want any entity? Do you want to start with any, or you want to keep it at entities? Entities located inside? Is that what you're saying?
Thank you. Board member Hall?
I don't have anything else to add. I agree with what's been said about entity, so, or my other option was gonna suggest any person or business entity or entity, but I think I'd rather see the person go away.
Board member Pinedo?
Board Member Pinedo. I have nothing to add.
I think okay, staff member Melvin, could you on line 11 strike any person including business and make it a capital E and make entities located in or outside Oregon that engage in the practice of compounding? Entities located in or outside Oregon that engages in the practice of compounding. We're missing something, compounding a drug for dispensing, delivery, or distribution in Oregon must register with the board as a drug outlet and comply with the board regulations. Okay, maybe that does work.
What about entities that are
Engage, I
located?
think just.
We're missing a word. There we go. Thank you.
The engage, I think, doesn't need to be plural.
Engage in entities that
Entities that are,
thank you, that are located in Oregon. In or outside Oregon is fine.
that engage in the person. Or just a single word. In Oregon.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm gonna pause, and does anyone have further thoughts or comments?
Board President Joyce, so we're not making any substantive changes to doing this, right? I mean, that's not substantive.
No, and just to remind everyone too, we did not do official rulemaking process. What we did was just rules feedback. So you can make all the changes you want at this time to then go to the rulemaking process. And then when you review that afterwards, that's when the substantive or not makes a difference.
Thank you.
All right, great. We'll move on to the next one. We can always come back to other sections as we need. So this is the definition section, OAR 855-183-0005. As a reminder, the definition of compounding will be located here and in paren 6 as it applies to several divisions. The only proposed edits we have per comments from the public were in paren 3. Let me pull that up. I apologize. So paren 3. We received a comment that the board should clarify that compounding by a pharmacy must be patient-specific and consistent with federal compounding limitations, which is 100% true. And what we were trying to achieve in our last edits made and reviewed by the board at the February board meeting was that, but it appears we might have missed the mark. So staff has revised to ensure that we capture what is permitted within federal regulations related to the activity being limited to patient-specific prescriptions only. We also received additional comments about adding specific definitions or quantity limits to anticipatory compounding as set forth in federal law. All of federal law does apply as outlined, which is going to be a little redundant here that we just talked about in 183-0015. Paren 5 to comply with all state and federal laws and rules. I do think the way we set out this survey, someone might have answered questions to 1 and 2 and not been able to see the third set of rules. So thus some of these questions arose. So they weren't able to see a full picture. They only saw snapshots of the rules as providing comments. So we can assess that too and how we figure out to do this in the future. But staff does believe that this is already accounted for and that no further edits would be necessary. And that the current draft would not allow unlimited amount of anticipatory compounding, would not permit the compounding of essential copies as federal regulations state. We would be in compliance with those. The next comment that I wanted to address with the board was for paren 2. This definition was created at the board's direction. And it is slightly different than the compounding area definition of USP 795 or 797. It combines both in an attempt to provide some clearer direction. This definition is in addition to specific circumstances for those areas of 795 and 797 and would still apply. This is only to ensure that per the work group's recommendation that prohibiting carpet and animals in the compounding area, which yes, is more strict than USP, would apply. So again, the comments here, I think, were a little bit of not knowing what was coming. So the compounding area is used in rule and it's 183.0015. The following is prohibited in the compounding area and it has paren A carpet and paren B animal. There were also comments that this is more restricted than USP, and just to clarify again, yes, that is true, and the board has transparently discussed this as such. As discussed with the board at the December board meeting, the board wanted to keep the carpet as prohibited. That it would be helpful to have some clarifying limitations of where compounding occurs so that other parts of the pharmacy may have carpet as needed. Furthermore, if retail pharmacies had designated areas where they wanted to use floor mats that could say meet USP 795 requirements that state surfaces should be resistant to damage by cleaning and sanitizing agents and floors in the compounding area should be easily cleanable and should not be porous or particulate generating, then this could be achieved for, say, compounding things like magic mouthwash. And then the limitations of the prohibition of carpet in the compounding area could be achieved more effectively with less barriers. I believe those were all the comments that we wanted to address. So I will go ahead and ask board members to provide feedback, starting with Board Vice President Kirkbride.
There was a comment about the word reconstituting appearing in both the sections of what compounding is not and what compounding is, and I agree that that can be confusing. So just kind of finding that out. I don't know how to fix it because I know it is referring to two different things. I agree with the addition in yellow. I also noticed a comment that maybe repackaging needed more detail. That's not my area of expertise. So I'll leave others to comment on that. Repackaging, I might have said repacking. And then I did have a question regarding 3d. There was a question from one of our vet pharmacy colleagues, I believe, that gave an example that if you were using a product off label, for example, for an animal that was not part of the FDA approved labeling, would that be considered manipulation, that would meet this definition of compounding? I don't know if you saw that question.
Yeah.
Okay. So that example given in that comment would be compounding.
Step I think, so what's difficult is I think a lot of this might have, it feels like maybe got like siloed out as people were looking at things related to it, especially maybe just touching upon the reconstituting. I think, and again, maybe I've lived with this longer, but that is the necessary term to define, and that it really is, it's critical to read the full definition to get the full context, and that when you parcel it out by line, it can get confusing and lost. I'm trying to think of the exact full statement, but again, let's look at what is compounding, right? So if it's patient specific, so if in this situation, so we don't know all the factors related to the comment that was provided, but if they're compounding it for a specific that patient, that it would then, if it is preparing the drug dosage form for humans or animals, right? Preparation of drugs or devices in anticipation of a prescription based on the routinely, regularly observed prescribing ordering patterns, or a sterile preparation. Compounding includes repackaging and manipulation of commercial products for patient-specific needs beyond FDA-approved labeling. So anything outside of what the FDA labeling is for that manipulation of the product would be compounding. So if that product is labeled to, or say to compound as such for a specific patient in the circumstances above that, like we talked about the vaccine, that's no longer compounding when you use that outside of that labeling. However you do that, if you do that, that would be considered compounding. That makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So that answers my question about that. And I think that's all the notes I had in that section. Thank you.
So staff member Matt, we have a recommendation maybe to also account for the reconstitution piece that was highlighted, is adding in Ren 3. What compounding is would be, help me out here, feel free. Sneak Gustafson.
So we say this separately. So in USP and their definition, they say reconstituting other than as provided in the manufacturer's labeling. They say it all together. We say it separately. And I'm wondering if that's where some of the confusion is happening because they're not connecting the two. So we could potentially put that straight into it, even though it's redundant, just to make it clear that we mean reconstituting if you're doing something besides what is indicated. Does that seem?
I don't think that hurts to be redundant here because it seemed to be a frequent comment.
Yeah.
Yes. So line 59, if you don't mind reading it, Rachel, do you mind adding just so they can take a peek to see what it would look like? Sorry, staff member Melvin.
So, yeah,
Then
after reconstituting. yeah.
After reconstituting, go ahead.
And then it would be, Sweet Gustafson, it's other than as provided in the manufacturer's labeling. That's how USP says it, and we don't have to say it exactly that way, but that's how it's worded there to clarify that they need beyond the normal.
Let's flow with the rest of it.
Okay, can you just highlight, we can do a cross reference to after just to make sure we're not having any
Let's put this in blue.
consequences, but we can talk more about this. Sorry, back to you, Vice President Kirkbride.
I'm all set. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Board Member Patel?
No, I have nothing further to add, but that's more clear.
Board Member Smith?
Nothing further to add. Thank you.
Board Member Kroger?
Board Member Kroger, I think the only concern I have is in the definition of compounding area and how that will be kind of maybe inspected or interpreted for pharmacies. I think the restricted location or the word restricted is what gives me some pause because for non-sterile, like, you know, the magic mouthwash, the compound example for the day, does not need to be in a restricted location. I think a designated location that limits the access and where activities related to compounding occur, or is limited in access or restricted when compounding activities are occurring would make me more comfortable with that definition. I understand, like, if it's sterile compounding, yes, absolutely restricted. You've got to do all the things you need to do before you're entering that space. Non-sterile compounding, the kind of day-to-day, you know, retail outlet, magic mouthwash, you know, mixing creams. I think this may be confused and interpreted as like it needs to be a completely separate room as opposed to a separate space that like you articulated with the cleaning and all that kind of stuff that needs to occur.
So Steph Member Wood, are you maybe suggesting then just means a designated location by the registrant that limits personnel access and where only activities and items related to compounding may occur?
That could be one option, or something along the lines, compounding area means a location designated by the registrant that limits personnel access when activities related to compounding occur. Or something along those lines, so that it's clear, because I can imagine there's probably some entities that, hey, my compounding area is this corner of my pharmacy, production line. 90% of the time, we're not doing any compounding, but it's, Thursday afternoon and I just got, prescription. Now we're going to designate this area for that amount of time, clean it up, make sure it's appropriate, limit it in some manner. But when the compounding activities are occurring, I don't know if that's a happy medium or, I mean, just removing restricted, I think is definitely a step in the right direction. But I think it should also be clear that there might be times where it's not being used at all as a compounding area, and it can only be used as a compounding area when it meets, the other cleanliness type standards.
Staff Member Funk, yes, I hear what you're saying, and I think there is definitely a lot of education, outreach, and communication and how we inspect that goes into this, but I can hear you also with the word restricted, having maybe more heightened concern from individuals on what that might mean. And I know the board's intention is not to limit or inhibit people from doing magic mouthwash and other things that are what might be called simple compounding, but really there's a need in the community for that. So doing it, but doing it safely to be able to meet that other intention of USP and having that area that can be cleaned and sanitized appropriately. So Staff Member Melvin, do you mind maybe striking through restricted? And then let's say, again, I just don't want to unintentionally lose any components of this. So we'll make sure council's paying attention for us to help give feedback if we're going too far on this. What Board Member Kroger just said means a location designated by the registrant that limits personnel access. So it's when compounding is occurring. So how do we want to say that in the right words? When compounding occurs? That feels like I might be losing some components of this though.
Maybe like when compounding activities.
Yeah,
She was proposing to strike and where only and replacing that with the word when.
strike that and put when activities. And then just leave it at that. Compounding area means a location designated by the registrant that limits personnel access when activities and items related to compounding just occur instead of may occur. Get rid of may. Or it may occur, is may still needed? May is still needed, okay.
I don't think so may need it, but I'm gonna, yeah, right? Items related to compounding.
Compound occurs. Sorry.
Because I think people are always doing it, right? So, hey, you need the mag. So like you're always doing it.
Board Member Kirkbride, and then I think we need to look at that when we get to the section that talks about what restrictions there are in the compounding area and look at those side by side.
Pretty sure it was.
Make sure we haven't done anything unintentional there.
Thank you for that reminder. All right, great. And we'll move on to Board Member Chin then.
No further comments, thank you.
Board Member Hall?
Member Hall, I just have the same comments as Board Member Kroger, and it looks good.
And Board Member Pinedo?
Board Member Pinedo, thank you for bringing that up, because there was a lot of comments regarding this on how during inspections would a retail pharmacy have a location that would be restricted to just compounding. And I could see how that would be kind of an issue in a lot of pharmacies of not having that specific space. So I really appreciate this being addressed.
Thank you. Board Member Joyce?
Laura Joyce, yeah, I mean, this clears it up. It makes it, not so strict as far as, using words like restricted and segregated or whatnot. Now I appreciate these changes.
This is Smee Gustafson. One thing to note, compounding area is a requirement in USP 795, which would address the magic mouthwash. So you have to have a designated area, but it does state that in your SOPs or how you outline what that area is, what that looks like, your restrictions, all that. So that would be how upon inspection, they could confer, are you in alignment with your SOPs? Are you following your procedures and your rules for that? But there are rules too that with the compounding area that when compounding is occurring, no other activities can be occurring in that area. So that still would have to be met and like outlined in that. So I think that's part of why we wanted it to be clear that there's a separation, because we don't want people to get tripped up with that, especially in like a retail setting where you do have a blend of things that are happening. You still would have to have some designation of not other things happening while you're doing that compounding, if that makes sense. And it's really more about cleaning, right? They don't want you cleaning and stirring up things when you're compounding, but you still would have to meet that. So we were trying to help navigate that a little bit so that they understood the kind of USP requirements, even to do a magic mouthwash, which granted, it's simple, right? We all get that. But now it falls under, yeah.
Board Member Joyce, so we're talking about both CNSP and CSP in this, so trying to cover both areas.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's definitely, I think a really great point that Smee Gustafson has raised is really keeping in mind that this is not replacing, this is clarification in addition to, especially for those that might not necessarily be compounding frequently, that they're infrequently compounding. This might help them also kind of understand and have the capabilities to do those, again, for lack of a better term, simple compounds. All USP requirements, but still said. Okay. I think we got through everyone on this one. Any further comments? I apologize, I didn't ask last time before we move to the next section on anything we've done so far. Okay, we'll go to the next section, which is notification requirements. So we are 855-183-0010. Staff has requested a policy discussion on this section of notification requirements. There were several great thoughts brought forth, and staff would like to know the board's direction before we would attempt to modify or draft anything if there was a possibility of the board wanting to change these. Before diving into the policy discussions, I just wanted to address a few of the questions raised regarding this section. First, what is the purpose of this rule? It is the board's responsibility to regulate effectively to protect the public, and real-time oversight significantly enhances the board's ability to monitor high-risk activities as they occur. This proactive requirement ensures that the board maintains an accurate inventory of drug outlets, significantly enhancing public safety. And this information is critical for the board to know how to investigate and inspect appropriately. Secondly, this form would be electronic and available on the board's website. Also, the board will require questions regarding compounding status to be answered on their renewals too. So there'll be other modalities for us to get this information. So with that, moving on to address the request that some individuals have made related to changes. Some of the comments the board received: is notification required only at the time services initially begin, or is additional notification needed if it is expanded, say from non-sterile to now sterile compounding? There was requests to make this list of compounders available publicly. Suggestions to establish a licensing category specific to sterile compounding. Suggestion to require a pre-30-day notification prior to the pharmacy engaging in any sterile compounding or shipping products into Oregon. Suggest to require notification prior to engaging compounding, 14 days in advance. Suggest to require notification when discontinuing compounding and why, for example, FDA action. Suggest to revise the rule to address or require notification for situations where a pharmacy dispenses compounding sterile product that was not prepared by itself, i.e. obtained from a outsourcing facility. And when does this rule apply for a drug outlet that has already been compounded? Would they have to notify the board if information is captured already in a registration application? So with that, let's move on to the policy discussion. Does the board want to make any changes to the notification requirements based on the feedback from the public? And we have board member Patel starting us off.
So, Board Member Patel, I know the initial intent is for inspectors, right? So when they go to inspect the outlet, so they kind of like, is this, I'm going to inspect just the retail side, or is the retail is also doing the non-sterile, or this outlet also have retail, sterile and non-sterile compounding, right? So you guys can um, plan, the inspector can plan ahead of time. So with that in mind, and I can see this, so confusing, but I think the way it is, I think is fine with me. And then, but the only one thing is like a drug outlet must notify the board on a form provided by board, right? So which form, is that the self-inspection form, or is that they have to log into their profile and then notify the board?
Question, staff member Fluff, we did receive other comments on this. So it will just be a form on the website. So they're similar as like pharmacy closures. We have the same rule language as a form provided by the board. So if you go to the website, there's pharmacy closures and you can put in there's a form provided by the board where you would have to enter all that information. We would assume that we would create a similarly situated thing here. We did, I will say, thank you for all the comments too on ideas on how to write this language better and to maybe name the form something.
Yeah.
We do worry about naming though, because then if anything gets changed on the website, like we worry about the disconnect that could happen with that. And we have other migrations that happen IT wise that we don't have control over, that we have to follow. So we would just worry that that could unintentionally someday change. So I think our suggestion would be for just our processes, this is the best language we could think of currently, but we could do a lot of outreach and communication with that.
Within the website, so.
Could you please, staff member Melvin, do you mind sharing a little more?
Sure, yes.
They do.
Staff member Melvin, so these are fillable forms, so you just fill out the cells like PIC change form. We have a multitude of these, so the title is always placed right above the form with like instructions on what to do, and if it's required, it'll have a little asterisk in it, or it's in red, and it's so in order to progress the form, all of the requirements would be labeled right there. You hit submit, the end user gets a copy of it, we get a copy of it, paper trail.
Can see both. I think that's the case, then it looks fine. And then the other thing also I would like to share with licensee that now our board, the inspector, they're pretty good. They send the notification that, hey, we are planning to inspect your pharmacy in next 4 weeks or 2 weeks, right? Then they also have that opportunity to just reply like, hey, by the way, I didn't submit this form, but just want to let you know, we just start making non-sterile compounding 30 days ago or 15 days ago or whatever. I think if that is our intent, that make sure our inspector have plan ahead of time. If that is the intent, I think this is fine. And then licensee also can send back the email that we start doing compounding. So unless I hear something else.
Member Smith?
Board Member Smith. No licensee is like very specific details on things. I think leaving this vague though is actually like kind of a good thing. I think the intent of this was just so that board inspectors had the heads up, there was compounding going on. I don't want this to be used to get anyone in like trouble for compounding, but I do think it is good for people to be aware of compounding. So I think keeping this as is a good call. And I feel like if we start adding more minutia in there, we could make things more complicated. Thank you.
Kroger.
I don't have anything to add.
All right, board member Chin.
Sorry.
Well, if she didn't, I certainly could.
It's second.
Welcome to board member Hall.
Member Hall, I don't know, so the part about a form, could we just say, let's notify the board on a compounding notification form? I mean, technically you wouldn't be naming it, because you're saying a, not the. Sounds better.
Staff member Ruff, so are you suggesting on a compounding form provided by the board? Is that
Yeah.
clarify what the form is?
Yeah, it just sounds a little bit better. And then,
Sorry, go ahead.
I just was wondering, currently on the renewals, we're already asking about whether the pharmacy is compounding. Right?
Staff member Arfman, yes, but I think some of what we've been doing, it will be mandatory. So it's been, if someone would leave it blank or didn't answer, it's not something that necessarily would be like a required field. And there's been a lot of, for example, like pharmacists could share whatever they might be prescribing and that it's self-reported. So we'll probably put a little bit more tightness on that being a required component of the applications to make sure that we get that notification clear in the system.
So, I guess I would just hope that, when these go into effect, that would happen on the renewal forms first, so that way, he feels like they have to do a notification on this form if they already did the renewal and it was required. That's it.
Thank you for those comments. I think that is one important thing that if and when the board passes these rules, we will need to do outreach and communication on what that looks like related to taking what we have in our database, populating that in of who is compounding, who isn't, and then trying to capture that as soon as we can on the next renewal so that we have it active. Because to the point, I think the way this is read, within 15 days of initiating it, if I initiated it 2 years ago, what does that, and I already told the board about it, that doesn't seem like a good use of anyone's time for everyone to have to go back and fill those forms. So I think we'll need to do some targeted communication on that also. Thank you for all those comments. And Stefan, do you mind putting in maybe what's right, notify the board?
So that's a naming convention when you do that, though. That's, I thought you
You
said.
can't just say the compounding form provided by the board. I'm sorry.
No, you can, but I thought you said we did not want to name the form.
I didn't think
That's
it's a type of form.
A compounding form.
Right. I think that wouldn't be the name of it. That seems like just a type of form. So we have a pharmacy closure form. We have a, what is that, the naming convention? We'll give it a go. We'll see what other people think too as we go around. We'll go around one more time. But let's get everybody a chance to speak. Board President Joyce.
I believe Board Member Pinedo.
No, Benito, I'm so sorry. Board Member Benito. Thank you.
Board Member Fernando, it's okay. I have nothing to add.
Thank you for your graciousness. Board President Joyce.
Board President Joyce, so is it common in other states for entities to notify the board after they intend or after they've started compounding? Because some of the comments like, maybe before. So is that common? I mean, so let's say we're giving them 15 days, they've been compounding and the board doesn't know about it. Is that gonna be patient safety issue? Not sure, but, why not before they start compounding? Is it that big of a difference, I guess? Yeah, please.
Board Member Kroger, my thoughts on the notification requirement and before or after compounding, like the question. Our inspectors are not going to change their schedule based on notification before compounding occurs. This is not a requirement that an inspection occurs before compounding activities begin. So therefore, to me, it doesn't really matter that when that notification comes in, because there isn't going to be a change internally here, whether it's 15 days before you start or 15 days after. The inspectors aren't necessarily going to say, wait, don't start compounding until I get there and approve it. It is kind of the way I look at it, and I don't know if Bree agreed.
So Stefan Brefmoff, I think I don't really have an opinion on this either way. I think there's different states do it differently. So there are some states that require a separate registration. Thus, you have to clearly have potential inspections prior to engaging and other situations of such. I think the only thing as this board has gone down the path of not doing that type and thinking of sterile and non-sterile collectively in one notification, they are very different things. So I could see something like sterile, no one's going to just start doing sterile compounding, right? It takes a ton of time, a ton of energy and money to get everything put in place. to be able to do that safely and to do it correctly. Unlike maybe something like non-sterile compounding where you're going to maybe do a magic mouthwash every now and then, you could get that pulled together potentially with your P&Ps and other things related to that in a much shorter time frame. That maybe you wouldn't want to prohibit those individuals from being able to have a patient show up and need this compound, but wait, we didn't tell the board ahead of time that we're going to do this yet. So I think there's a variety of ways that you can look at this, none of them being wrong and none of them being necessarily the right way either. It's just really what works for this board at this time, and you can always reassess these and change these. And I think if we're going to be a state where we're not necessarily too able to share with the public, this is everybody that's doing sterile, this is everybody that isn't, which would be great if we could, but how do you do that right in a meaningful way? That maybe some of these other processes aren't as necessary or as effective if we can't offer those other services.
Right, and then what would be the pros, or and cons of having a separate registration? Is that, I mean, it's a lot of work, right? I mean, you know, in regards to patient safety, I don't think we need a separate registration, just saying. You know, in inspections, you're already looking at how a hospital is complying with USP, you know, are there violations? Are they not testing their IV technicians, and are they not testing staff? Are they, you know, is there bacteria growth and so forth? There's USP standards, and we inspect those. So I don't think there's a need for additional registration, just saying. Thank you.
Stefan Brockhoff, I think it's one, as the board kind of travels down this path and maybe readdressing it after these rules have been in effect for a little while too, I think it's almost like a philosophical way of how you look at it too, or how you want to allocate your budget. So if you're looking at, you're providing all these extra services from the staff that you have to become the USP experts to be able to inspect that and provide that service, you're taking on that cost and having to basically just take that on. So something like a separate registration allows transparency to the public of who is doing that service. It allows the funds and finances to be able to run that program effectively. But again, it costs more. It can cause other administrative burdens and processes for those registrants that you might not want to limit those who are doing non-sterile or even sterile in areas. We have a lot of frontier land in our state. So I think there is no one size fits all for everyone in this either.
Yeah,
A really great discussion. I appreciate you raising that.
Thank you.
Vice President Kirkbride?
Two comments. I'm not in favor of adding the word compounding there. I think we should keep the generic form provided by the board because it is consistent throughout our rules and referenced many times, a form provided by the board. And so if we're gonna name one thing a compounding form, then I think we'd have to go through our rules and name everything the something form. So I don't support that. But is there a place, so is there like a central place where people go to find all the forms? Is there a section called forms and they go there and that's where all the forms are, or? Yes, okay, perfect. So I think that's sufficient to find all the forms, yes.
You can just search form at the top of our website and it will get you to the places you're trying to go because they are on different pages.
Okay.
And there's a compounding form right now on our compliance tab that is not related to this, not related to this. It's something else that's
My
required.
second comment,
Sure.
I actually think it might help if we just flip this sentence around. And I noticed even if you look down below on item 2, it starts with each drug outlet must do something within 15 days. And I wonder how common in our rules, when you're asking someone to do something within a certain amount of days, is it worded where it starts within 15 days versus entity must? Like, let's be consistent with how we do that in our rules. And that might be what was causing people to read, because there was one comment that was like really a weird interpretation. Sorry, not a weird interpretation, a different interpretation than we intended. And it might be the way the sentence is structured differently than some of the other references in our rules. And so I think if we just flipped this sentence around, maybe it would be more familiar with other requirements where the within 15 days is at the end of the sentence. Just a suggestion.
Yeah, Stefan Barthoff, that's a really great point, and I see what you're making. Staff member Melvin, do you think you could draft something up for us to start with each drug outlet must? I think that's the more
Yeah.
consistent way we've been doing it. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, sorry, Staff Member Rowan, that she is correct. So if we would like that to universally match some of the more recent rules we've adopted, I will work on that and we can come back to it if you want.
Can we just? Jeff?
Or you want to
just-
do it right
can we
now?
Do it right now, just each drug outlet must. Must notify the board within, or do you want 15 days at the end? Within 15 days, or notify the board on a form provided by the board of initiation of sterile compounding, non-sterile compounding, or both within 15 days? So what you're saying, kind of flip it to the end? Please help us, Vice President Kirkbride.
I'm looking at item 2 in the next section, 0015, where the within 15 days is kind of at the very end, but really what I would be looking for is that it's most consistent with how it's throughout our rules, so.
I think it would be more like that, right?
I think so too. So currently it now states each drug outlet must notify the board on a form provided by the board within 15 days of initiation of sterile compounding, non-sterile compounding, or both. Still reads a little funny to me.
Notify the board on a form provided by the board is awkward.
There's too many.
Remember how the section that we're referring to, it names a form, so we're gonna be consistent. Not name that form.
Well, health inspection forms do have their own names. And they are PDF, they are not fillable, they're a different type of form.
Staff member from what I am learning at this moment, the difference between the compounding self-inspection form is that is an actual PDF that is put on the website as opposed to a fillable form that is then submitted to board staff. So they have a different, yeah. So it's more like a PIC change form, yeah.
Okay, let's float back up here. Each drug outlet must notify the board within 15 days of initiation of sterile compounding, non-sterile compounding, or both. And then can we put that using a form provided by the board at the end of that?
One more time, each drug outlet must notify the board within 15 days of initiation of sterile compounding, non-sterile compounding, or both, using a form provided by the board. See council nodding her head, so that means we're at least somewhat there. How's everyone else feel about this? Right, feeling good. Thank you. I think we didn't go the whole way around. I apologize. Did we get the whole way around? Board Member Patel? You started, right?
What, are you asking board member Panetta, I think? We're missing.
Board Member Pinedo, I skipped her accidentally before and then got back to her. This one's taken a while to get around.
No, I'm good.
Open it up to any further comments or questions. All right, sounds good. We'll move to the next section then. All right, this is 855-183-0015, general requirements. In this section, staff has made one small suggested change by adding a paren s to animal. So it is an animal or animals, plural. And in 7B, in 7B, and there's a policy discussion slated for paren 6. But I first wanted to address a few comments or questions that were raised in these sections. So in paren, I guess 1 paren A, we received a comment recommending we simply put the language to comply with the current USP. I just wanted to make sure the public and everyone is informed on this again. Also, the board has discussed this and we are required by state regulations to ensure we have versioning. So the public and the licensees are aware of what version of standards they're required to follow. We must make this available for review at the board office if requested. And this is also the reason we do the standards by adoptive reference that we did earlier today. So I just wanted to address that comment. And then we can dive into paren 6. So it's important to remember this requirement is for non-resident drug outlets that reside in the state, that reside in a state that does not require USP standards and does not inspect to that standard every 2 years. If and when this rule is effective, staff will create a list to share publicly of which states this would apply to. This would be similar to how Washington handles this, but we'll actually have something in Rule 2. And we would incorporate this process into the staff delegated authority annual review. So these will be looked at regularly with the board and given publicly. Also, it's important to note that this list allows for third-party vendor approval. So you can see listed in paren E, if you don't mind scrolling down just a touch, as otherwise approved by the board. We could incorporate other requested vendors either into the staff delegated process, staff delegated authority process, or we could just do as far as we receive them. So the board could review and approve these. Just wanted to also address this related to one of the recommendations that we received related to Gates Healthcare Associates. That was something that was on our list that might fit into this paren E because the way the structure of this rule is written, it's individuals that can do accreditation or inspections, and Gates doesn't do accreditation. So that was why we were thinking that that would maybe be incorporated in that other section, but just wanted to give that because there were a few individuals that had made comments about that. And I'll definitely let our SME give some information too related to some of those comments. I'm sure she has some thoughts that could be helpful. But with that, bringing up the policy question, really asking the board, do you want to address the list of accredited, certified, or approved inspection providers based on the comments received by the public? And those did include a request to remove the Coalition for Compounding Excellence. Do you mind, maybe, could we pause here for 1 second? And do you mind just sharing a little information about that, Natalie or Smee Gustafson?
This is Smee Gustafson. Yeah, I saw the comment on that. So CCE, or the Coalition for Compounding Excellence, it's a newer accreditation firm. So I think it's just less known by different, entities. But it is backed by APC, which is the Alliance for Pharmacy Compounding. And the whole goal of that organization is to promote legal, quality, very ethical compounding. You have to meet like certain standards, right, for that. The thing that is a little bit different about them that I think could be good, and I think we're going to see this more in the future, they utilize a risk mitigation strategy, which is a little bit different than the other accrediting bodies. This is more similar to what FDA does. So all of these go through, right? They have like very in-depth questions that are basically a gap analysis of, are you meeting USP or not? CCE also does an analysis of, okay, let's say you have an area where you're slightly deficient or missing, how high is the risk of that? Is that something that needs to be immediately corrected? Is that something that should be corrected in longer term? So they kind of rate based on that, which is kind of interesting. But as far as I know, like, it's not like there's some national organization that says, yes, these 5 are the, independent third parties to use. We just have to kind of analyze based on sort of their practices and how they do things. Gates is tricky because they don't get an accreditation, but they are very thorough. I've undergone a Gates inspection, and they're just as detailed as when I did a PCAP one. It's more of a gap analysis that they do. So they'll give you a form and they'll tell you like where you met or didn't meet, but they won't make a ruling on it, right? Whereas like when you do PCAP or something that's accredited, if you don't meet something, in order to achieve that accreditation, you have to do a plan of correction and actually like take the next steps. You don't do that with Gates. Gates leaves that up to whoever you're giving that information to decide if you need to do a plan of correction or not. So that is a key difference between Gates versus some of these others. Gates is accepted by a lot of states though, including Washington. So it is more commonly seen by a lot of the pharmacies here that are licensed in these others. A lot of us have undergone that because of that. So it's really kind of your call, like what level you want these to be at, really.
Thank you so much for that. And I'll just list a couple other comments we received related to that. Also, there were comments related to narrow the list of approved inspecting organizations to only NABP and keep other third parties as approved by the board, and a recommendation for a language change to allow drug outlet to provide notice to the board to submit and implement a plan of correction demonstrating timely remediation for eligibility for licensure if they are unable to provide an approved inspection within 2 years. Just wanted to give one note to the board that could be a difficult logistical challenge to achieve with limited resources and could raise some concerns on transparency and consistency, but it was brought forth and wanted to bring that to the board to make sure that it was part of your consideration for discussion. So with that, I will hand it off to Board Member Smith, if you don't mind starting us off.
Board Member Smith, I like the idea of staff delegated authority, for adding, their accrediting organizations. Other than that, I don't have much to add. Thank you.
Board Member Kroger?
Board Member Kroger, I don't have strong opinions on the listing of accredited certifying programs. I think I would maybe lean toward a narrower list and then working and approving additional programs based off of like the review by staff and then feeling more comfortable with that. But that's just really because this is not my area of expertise per se, to know which accrediting or certifying organizations or inspection organizations are, would be acceptable here. Is that all we're talking about right now?
You could talk about this whole section, please feel free.
And I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I do think current 2 reads a little funny to me. It talks about, and so self-inspections are required to be complete by July 1st. Yes. At the same time, you would also complete your compounding self-inspection if you were compounding. And then you would do it within 15 days of a change of PIC. But the way this reads, it almost looks like in addition to the July 1st, then you only are completing the compounding self-inspection within 15 days of PIC appointment. Do you see how I'm kind of reading that? So I think we don't need to reword it or hash it out here, but it's July 1st, self-inspection form plus the compounding self-inspection form, and within 15 days of a change of PIC. Both of those are also required, correct?
Correct, sorry, so, just
Yeah.
trying to process, is there a better way we could say this? Because just thinking out loud too, this is, sorry, staff member Efremoff listed in the requirements for the firm assist in 115, but also this is specifying that this is a separate self-inspection form because not every service is right. This is something specific and making sure that there's transparency in that because we're thinking about everyone dispensing practitioner drug outlets and all of those that will be applicable to some of these regulations too, and making sure we're clear related to that. So if there's better language, and now that you're saying that using PIC.
I mean, to me, it could be each drug outlet must ensure the self-inspection forms are completed as required in whatever other rules we have related to that.
Gotcha.
Or something where it's kind of just a bit specific.
So maybe, can we when we go on a break, maybe we could try to throw something together and bring that back up for the board.
It's not a huge deal.
Okay.
That's it, thank you.
Board Member Chin,
Nothing to add, thank you.
Board Member Hall,
Member Hall. I think I'm fine with the list we have. Are we talking about the prohibited in the compounding area? Or are we gonna come back to that?
oh, that's a great idea. Yes, please. Do you want to look at the new language and make sure it flows too as we're discussing it?
Sorry. I just know there was some comments about whether would be allowed to put a mat over a carpet. So I don't know if it could be addressed, like if it's under the mat, and that's approved for compounding area. Someone also mentioned consider food.
Drinks and bottles of water.
Yeah.
I think isn't that part of this is board member Chen, isn't that just part of the standard practice of doing compounding that we shouldn't have to spell that out?
I remember, but we have the rule like, in general, you cannot have food or drink in your workplace, so.
Staff member Ekmoff, there isn't necessarily any rules or clarity in USP
Yeah.
on this, but I think there's an argument to be made related to potentially unprofessional conduct and standards of practice, depending on how egregious it is, and sanitary conditions, depending on what kind of compounding you're doing. Of course, you're not gonna have food in a sterile compounding hood or something of that nature. Like, I would hope not, right? So I think, food is tricky. It might be a lot of policies and how outlets operate, but not necessarily regulations that it's clarified.
Hall, yeah, there's other restrictions for sterile compounding, but this is for both, right? This is for both.
Yes, staff member, yes, this is all compounding. The compounding area for all compounding. And do you mind just scrolling back up so we could read the quick definition in the previous section of definitions for compounding area, just to see if it flows really quick too. So compounding area means location designated by the registrant that limits personnel access when activities and items related to the compounding area may occur. Okay, do you mind scrolling back down to 6? Or 7, I lied, sorry. The following is prohibited in the compounding area: carpet and animals.
Board Member Kirkbride, my recollection is that we were looking at that should versus must list, and we picked out things that we felt were a must to be incorporated in the Oregon rules. So the should things are still there in the USP, and these two things are a must in the Oregon rules.
Staff member Efroff, this was recommended by the work group. So this is how it came forth to the board.
I don't have any other comments, Board Member Hall.
Thank you for raising those. Board member Benito.
Board Member Pinedo. Yeah, I did see the comment about food and beverages that is prohibited in the compounding area, or designated area. But the carpet was another one of my questions. I do believe we did talk about like some sort of mat that could be put down in the designated area that could be cleaned according to USP standards for non-sterile compounding that would allow certain retail chains or pharmacies to be able to do non-sterile, like Magic mouthwash. And I think the carpet prohibits that.
So staff member Efroff, I think, again, this is a board decision. I think the intention of trying to address this was to be in alignment with what the shoulds are in USP related to the non-porous and the ability to sanitize, that would be this intentionality of not allowing having the prohibition of carpet in that compounding area, but understanding that if there is something that is a continuous surface that is non-porous, able to be sanitized, that is in that section, so that in my mind would look as that is the floor, not the carpet. It's whatever that barrier is that could meet those conditions, as those would then become applicable to this, that could be met. Because I don't want to overspeak and say that if you just put a mat, then a mat is fine. It would have to be in the right conditions to meet the right situation, right, of potentially having that intentionality, and that it's not technically then, in my mind, carpet in that compounding area because there's a different floor surface there at this time. And I think Board Member Kroger, did you want to talk?
What I was going to suggest is, and we could, think of different words, is like unprotected carpet, right? Like, hey, there's carpet there, but it's protected by a mat. So it's not just, free range carpet.
Non-free range.
Non-free range carpet, I think that works. So like, that's kind of where I'm going. It's like, how do we define the prohibition of this porous substance that you can't sanitize, you can't clean, but if you have created an area, a barrier that's sufficient for the compounding area, over the carpet, then the carpet has been. So, what was that?
The carpet is no longer.
Carpet, yeah, can't see it, so it doesn't exist. So I think that's like, to me, it's like define that. The type of carpet we don't want to see. Instead of just prohibiting carpet altogether because of that confusion.
I know this is me, Gustus in here. This is definitely a really tricky area, right? Because like when you're full compounding, like any of those inspectors coming in would, I mean, you wouldn't make it if you had carpet. They don't care if you have a mat or not, right? The only thing that's a little tricky is because the definition of compounding area includes sterile, you wouldn't, if we didn't include carpet, you don't want to imply that the board would be fine if you had carpet in your clean room. If that's, you know, and there's USP restrictions on that too. So, but you might be creating some conflict with USP if you do it that way. So you might have to adjust the wording slightly if that's like what you'd like to do.
The other option would be to, instead of having this be like a prohibition, this is more like the compounding area must have flooring that is acceptable for the level of compounding you are completing, or like something along those lines, where it's like, we're telling you, without telling you, like, it's not gonna be carpet, it's gonna be something else. Right, so like, instead of having it a negative, you turn it into like a positive. The compounding area shall have flooring that meets.
So staff member, Bob, you're maybe inferring that it would be putting those shoulds to shalls within USP 795 related to the non-porous flooring, the sterility piece. You would make that a must.
Speak Justice, and also the conflict with 800 for hazardous drugs, because the cleaners and things that you have to use to like, because you have to deactivate and decontaminate, there's zero chance you could ever do that in carpet. So this definitely could be nuanced out, but I think you would have to clarify like non-haz, non-sterile. I think if you want to allow mats, I think you would have to specify that. And even in that case, it's like, do you feel comfortable that if they're using powders? Like, you know, because thyroid is non-hazardous. That's a hormone though. And you can use powder, right? So there's a lot of non-hazardous drugs that are actually like, can be toxic to the body. They just don't fall under the NIOSH list for that. So it gets tricky, right? But if you're also just doing like a magic mouthwash where you're mixing 3 liquids, I don't think any of us are concerned about a mat on carpet for that, right?
Yeah, I think it's like the easy solution is saying no carpet. And so that doesn't necessarily make it the right solution, where what we're trying to say is do your compounding in an area that makes sense for the type of compounding you're doing. And that never includes carpet, but it may include covered carpet in, you know, in an appropriate way. So I'm sorry, I don't have an easy solution for this, since we're kind of combining all levels of compounding, sterile, hazardous, what have you, for it to be encompassing. So I think that, to me, that would be the work and the, you know, putting the, you know, smarter people in a room to discuss it than myself. So
Speak Justice, and this is also like the USP committee discussed this too. It's why it was a shall. They wanted it to be like a prohibition, but they ran into the same issue of the same things that we're discussing here, where it was like there's such a wide array of compounding that occurs that they did receive a lot of opposition, but they felt very strongly about it, that it like they wanted it to be a must not a shall not. So it's interesting, right? It's complicated for sure.
yeah, board member Kruger, I think, you know, I appreciate the work that has been done, you know, with the compounding experts, but my concern would be to limit access to those simple compounds and create this vacuum for people who need that, and create a whole nother issue. And I don't want, you know, Magic Mouthwash is such a great example, because you know that it's being used for, you know, somebody who's in having like oral ulcers and pain, like, right? Like, and I just, the thought of making that an even harder process for somebody to obtain is just not tenable for me.
Thank you for that really great discussion. I want to make sure that board member Nato doesn't have any more comments or other areas of this section really you'd like to address.
No, I do not. Thank you.
Thank you so much for raising that. Board President Joyce.
President Joyce, yeah, I think because we're trying to be broad here with compounding, it makes it a challenge because I have mixing, myself in a hazardous meds in with under USB 800 standards and USB 797 standards with non-hazardous IV medications, carpet. I could see that advice, no carpet, right? But no carpet in a CNSP setting, I mean, a mat would suffice, right? So it's two vastly different environments. It just kind of we really need to clean that up a bit because there's no way I can imagine a carpet inside a IV IV room. Not in any instance. I mean, not even back in the day when they didn't have secluded barriers. Before the anti-room days and all that. I mean, I just can't imagine carpet while you're mixing IVs. Now, in the CNSP environment, an outlet setting, I don't see why you couldn't have a carpet, but have a mat like everyone else is suggesting. So I don't know, we need to reword it differently. Because, we're trying to be broad here, but then you can't really be broad when there's two drastically different compounding environments.
Vice President Kirkbride.
So if these are things that are shall or should, and we're trying to make them a must, why wouldn't we just remove carpet from this rule and let it revert to follow USP? So no one would be out of compliance if they're following USP.
So staff member.
Based on what USP says.
So part of the discussion from the work group was, and I think part of what Smee Gustafson was sharing is that there shalls not must. So people can technically still then have carpet in their non-sterile compounding situations, and that there are maybe some concerns with powder hoods and other areas where different types of compounding that are non-sterile occur that would still be concerning potentially, and the ability to have non-porous ability to clean those in an effective manner. So that was just the work groups, the compounding work groups recommendations related to that was to really take those and expand upon that in a way that was meaningful. But back to what I think we've heard is that we were trying to maybe do it in a non-overly prescriptive manner and general, and that seems to have caused some confusion and add some conflict. So the board could decide to strike this. I would also offer potentially to maybe we can finish out these rules and we could bring this back in June and try to do a deeper dive with our SME here to see if there's maybe some suggested language that could capture related to those situations. And it's more of a requirement versus a prohibition and how you what type of circumstances are necessary. Again, we'll be in a situation then where it's more prescriptive and less general, but I think the way the board has kind of looked at this is you've followed USP, and anything that is in alignment with USP is generally spoken. Anything outside of that, you've been, clarifying in detail, which would still be in alignment with kind of the philosophy and way these rules are written. And we could then have, I know we're trying to move these, we could do a special rulemaking at a different time so that we're not caught up in having to wait till November. So there are a lot of different moving parts that we could look at our schedules and try to figure all of that out too. So it's not, you don't have to move them today per se. If this is going to cause too much confusion and potential barrier to patient care. Or you could strike it, your call. Board Member Kirkbride.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm not well versed enough in like what problem that causes. So like, okay, so then some people might do the wrong thing and then upon inspection, that's not caught, or I don't know, because that's not my area that we need to be more prescriptive when we're saying follow all these things. And from what I heard from a lot of the testimony is that 90% of the compounding pharmacies that are accredited and doing this, and they're all doing this anyway. And so it's gonna be a really small portion that are not doing the right thing. And so I feel like we might be trying to like fine tune this to like point to capture a really small number of bad actors when maybe that's not the point of what we need to be doing. So I don't know what the right answer is, whether we need to be more prescriptive and detail out what the flooring needs to look like that feels wrong to me. Or we need to strike it and just let it revert to USP and kind of see how that goes. I don't know, because I lack that expertise, but, I didn't have any other comments. I'm fine with the list of accrediting bodies. I think we're good with the as otherwise approved by the board for additional things. I'm fine with not removing the DCE based on the recommendations of the work group. And I didn't have anything to add. Thank you.
We're gonna finish going around and then we'll come back to you, board member Chin, if that's okay. We got, board member, Patel still needs to go.
Board member Patel, so I agree with the list for the accreditation commission, and then we can add if board staff, if anyone just come up with like, hey, can we add this one, and that's okay. And for the carpet and animal prohibition, carpet, I feel like we have to revert that one, because I can see a lot of people who are making magic mouthwash. They do not want them to stop magic mouthwash because of the prohibition in the carpet. And you're right, like, I don't see that anyone doing the sterile compounding or non-sterile hazard compounding or non-sterile, they're, if you're doing more complex non-sterile compound, they're going to have the carpet I don't imagine that, but I do fear that the people who are doing the simple compound like magic mouthwash or, mixing two creams, I think they're going to stop providing that service. So we have to reword with the carpet, and then we make sure that our intent is you can cover the carpet and you can still do the simple non-sterile compounding.
You and I want to go back to board member Chin, who so politely had her hand up. Would you please share with us your thoughts?
Member Chen, in the non-sterile carpeted places, did you intend for those services to have the non-porous mat? Is that accurate? Am I understanding that, or is carpet with non-porous mats in the non-sterile area ever okay?
So I think the difficulty here, I inherited this and just trying to honor what I felt like was put forth from the work group, that there are back to, I think, the same discussions Gustafson just shared. This has kind of been a contentious topic. USP did want to make it a must, but made it a should related to the floors and non-sterile compounding areas like banning carpet. So I think the difficulty is, I don't know. I think here's I guess one way to look at it. The board could strike this now and just have the one limitation be no animals in the compounding area. And we could see what we're assessing in real life. So out in the wild, whatever we see, we can keep track of, and we can identify if there are a lot of concerning behaviors or shy carpets with doing some crazy free range berries. I think there's a lot of good quotes today. So I think that's one way the board could approach this, to see if it is an issue in our state. Again, compounding is not something that is cheap to do, right? So it is something that takes a lot of time, effort, and a lot of preparation. So hoping that is what the majority is doing, but I do think the other point that we do need to address is that there are a lot of compounding's happening in a lot of retail pharmacies that have carpets, just like the floor we're looking at here, right? But at what point is that compounding necessarily concerning if you're doing that magic mouthwash compounding compared to the other more intensive non-sterile compounding? So again, if you're making it your business, I'm gonna guess, and I have faith in those pharmacists in the state, that is, you're likely probably not. You're gonna want to have a floor that you can clean easily, and that just sounds like a nightmare and a ton of work to have to do if you have carpet. I don't know how you would ever even achieve that anyway, and that wouldn't be healthy for you or your staff, et cetera, right? And those other situations are the one-offs to help take care of a patient in real time. So maybe we're making more of an issue than we need to at this time. You could strike it and then revisit it. That was a very long way of saying that, so I apologize.
Do you want to go over that?
Or council action.
Please.
The other option is that you could define carpet. So we would like, carpet does not include something that is carpeted and covered or something. You could try and do something like that too, if you wanted to. As a way to. And like when doing carpet does not include something covered by a mat when you are compounding magic mouthwash. Or like, you can get really specific if you want to, or you can go broader, however you want to, but it's another.
What I was thinking when I asked that question, board member Chen, was carpet unless covered by a non-porous mat. When only used in non-sterile compounding area was the only thing that I was trying to, when I was asking that question, if that made any sense. But it's either something like that makes sense to me or striking it, whatever. I mean, if we're looking at pharmacists being the highly trained professionals that we know they are, they should not be doing things that are going to put the patient at risk with that carpet, right? And so if they're supposed to be able to clean whatever surface they're compounding over, then it makes sense that they figure out how to do that.
So maybe we could go around and do a round of proposing to strike, and then AAG Hunt will help us rewrite 7 to just prohibit animals in the pharmacy or in the compounding area, compounding area. And we can go around and see how everyone feels about that, starting with board member Kroger.
Board member Kroger, I guess, yes, strike that. I've been looking up some other, I can share with you offline kind of some alternative language that maybe gets to where we're trying to go here. But yeah, strike it for now, I think. And I do think that, like the standard of care in our pharmacists, right? Like they're professionals, they should be doing the right thing. And when they aren't, then we can have those conversations till we get to a place where we can really hone in on what we're expecting with that, so.
Great, thank you. Board member Shin.
Board member Chen agrees.
Board member Hall.
Member Hall, I agree.
Board member Panino.
Board Member Pino, though, I agree.
President Joyce.
President Joyce, I mean, I why couldn't we put parentheses there? Right, just saying unless, like what you had stated, was kind of the same line of thinking, Board Member Chen. Could we put parentheses there unless covered with a non-porous in a non-sterile environment, or, I mean, just try to.
Staff member, if not, sorry, we will type this so everyone can see it and get a feeling for it, because I think it does help to visualize it. So on 142 carpet, just put in parentheses for now so that we can, and then our council can help us write it better.
Wordsmith.
There language you can pull from the USP
Yeah.
shall list that describes that surface.
Because our intent should be, as close to the USP as possible, but I know it's not specific in there.
Remember Kirkbrand.
Go ahead.
Board member Kroger, we're thinking of carpet, that is not covered. I don't love that either, but basically like that, it can withstand cleaning and sanitizing agents, is smooth, impervious, and non-shedding. right? Like, so how you get to a carpet that isn't any of those things? I don't know.
Put linoleum down.
Yeah,
The free range ones.
yeah. Those are kind of the words I'm looking for. It's that it should be able to withstand cleaning and sanitizing. And it should be smooth and pervious and non-shedding.
Staff member Bob, we can look up USP real quick too to try
Yeah.
to get the right.
This is
language
board
here, too.
member Chen. I'm gonna see my pharmacist inspectors out there with a shedding cone. I did get a smile out of it, Mr. Ball.
If you're not free.
That was my sweater, I swear.
Like as for Joyce, in para 7, it does say in the compounding area. So I mean, that's like a specific area. So maybe we're overthinking this whole thing. I don't know.
So staff member from the language from at least that could maybe be captured from USP 795 is, so I guess there, it starts with surfaces should be resistant to damage by cleaning and sanitizing agents. Floors in the compounding area should be easily cleanable and should be non-porous or particle generating. So maybe easily cleanable and non-porous or particle generating.
So striking what I have added and just tell me the line, please. I don't know what you're saying. Or you want it.
Carpet that is not covered.
We're not going with the not covered for now.
Okay, yeah, I don't understand the not covered, sorry, carpet. So wait, so the following is prohibited from the compounding area, carpet.
Carpet that is unable.
Flooring that is unable.
That's probably what you wanna go more.
Flooring that is unable.
It is not easily cleanable and not
Then Breeze words, insert here.
maybe of this USP, this is not me, not easily cleanable.
Flooring that is unable.
So we're doing the opposite, because it has to be cleanable. It
Right.
can't be, wow, sorry, this is too late in the day to do double negatives in my mind. Flooring. Right, flooring that is not easily cleanable and is porous or particle generating. The opposite of not would be just it.
It
seems like
How
Jeopardy right now.
It is.
We need the list, please. Please.
Or particle generating.
Then you're the senior AAG.
It's not easily cleanable for you, but I
Or spelled
can.
properly.
Pause for a moment. Let's read it in its entirety. Paren 7, the following is prohibited in the compounding area. Flooring that is not easily cleanable or porous. But then it would be not porous, not easily cleanable or is porous or particle generating, right?
Yeah,
Easy is.
It's defining. What gosh, it is right there.
I would say cleanable, comma, is porous.
Yeah, Smee Gustafson has raised a really great point. If you're going this route, we really do need to clarify that this is for non-sterile because sterile has more stringent requirements. So if the board is comfortable with saying the following is prohibited in compounding area for non-sterile, compounding would just be A though, because B, you don't want animals in it either. So one goes for both and one goes for one. Yeah, can we do first? We do animals first.
So in 7, you want me to put non-sterile at the end of this
No.
sentence? Okay, start over, please.
Can you move animals to A? So the following is prohibited in the compounding area, animals, and then B,
Mhm.
non-sterile compounding area. How do we get there?
We haven't defined, board member Kirkbrave, we haven't defined a non-sterile compounding area, so I think we'd have to go back and do that. And we also say at the top of our rules that all of these rules apply to both sterile and non-sterile compounding, so we'd probably have to address that as well. Sorry.
No, great, thank you for identifying that.
I would say we just address it in the item itself, like parentheses applies to non-sterile only.
Yeah.
Can that solve it?
So like in 7,
Could you make it an 8?
Then B, and then in parentheses at the end.
think you're,
it's not easily cleanable, is porous, or is particle generating and located in a non. So wait, do we need to define non-sterile then, or is non-sterile an acceptable terminology?
If you don't call it the non-sterile compounding area, I don't think we
Gotcha.
need to define it.
Thank you for that clarification. So can you put flooring as B?
yeah, so that outlining will have to change if we do it this way. Hang on,
Well-
I need to see it.
Can you just copy and paste what's up
Yes.
there?
Is this all right?
Yeah, the whole thing's gonna go down there.
Mhm.
And then just say flooring that is not easily cleanable, is porous, or is particle generating located in a
Yeah.
or what, or for non-sterile compounding, flooring that is, what is the right way to do this? To say first, could you maybe just put it at the beginning to, for non-sterile compounding flooring that is not easily cleanable, is porous, or particle generating?
I think that needs to be an 8 then. Say it again, please, sorry.
For non-sterile compounding?
So
Well,
I
it
think
needs
this will be number 8.
No, it's the following is prohibited in the compounding area for non-sterile compounding flooring that is not easily cleanable, is porous, or is particle generating. Because it still links to the compounding area. They need to be pulled together. There's probably a better way to do this, but it's not a separate thought completely, I don't think.
So
Can you put animal with S in a paren? Because you can't, one's not okay either. AG Hunt, do you have some magic to help us make this work?
So,
How about just for non-sterile compounding content? No. Okay, no. You still, okay.
Let's try.
so, and as board president Joyce, I mean, now that we've added that language, do we even need to say for non-sterile compounding? Because obviously in sterile compounding, you don't want that as well. Right?
Step member up front, it's true. It's prohibited.
So I think remember when we were saying like, when we're saying compounding area, remember how compounding area is defined? It's not the whole farm.
Right, it's a compounding area.
Designated, right? So if you're gonna, if this is all you need to compound by the product wash, you just need to not have carpet right here, right? It's not like you need to not have carpet in the pharmacy at all. You're not, you gotta rip it all out. You're saying you need to remove it square. Or, or you designate.
Or put that special man.
Spot. So is it really too much to say you can't have carpet in one?
Oh.
I was trying to think of how we're gonna prove this.
Member Kirkbride, yes, that's a concern, and it seems small, but for a small business who maybe doesn't own their property and can't make those modifications themselves, yes, that small modification could take away access to a service from a patient. Yes, the answer is yes. And that's what our concern is that we're taking away more than we're giving.
I think that looks good.
And I think so, staff member Ekhoff, one other thing that we just wanted to, as we're kind of ruminating over here and trying to digest this too, it's not necessarily wrong that it applies to sterile and non-sterile, but the fear here is if you're less restrictive in what you're outlining in rule here than what's in USP for 797, people might get confused related to that. So keeping this focused on how the board has done in the ethos of what you're writing the rules, everything is USP, anything that is more strict or outside of that is what you are clarifying specifically, thus the specifics here, animals and non-porous, easily cleanable, particle generating flooring for non-sterile is a should and now is a must in this situation.
Looks good.
All right, maybe we just pause on this one. We'll keep going and we can come back to this before we end today too, so that people can get a feeling for it. I will ask Board President Joyce, I know it is 3 o'clock now. I didn't know what your break time was, if you want to finish the next section or there's 2 more sections, or if you want to take a break or how you would like to proceed.
I feel like, we should move on, move forward and get power through this.
Okay, sounds great. So this is OER 855-183-0020 for labeling. Staff has no discussion points to raise for this section of rule, and honestly, I would just open it up for board discussion. There were a couple of questions, but they seemed kind of straightforward answers related to example, how long a record's kept. It would be 3 years from the date something is started, but we'll let the board ask any other further questions for discussion you might have. And we are starting with board member Kroger, I think.
I think I started last time, but it's okay. I have nothing to add this time.
Board member Chin,
No questions.
thank you. Board member Hall,
Member Hall, I don't have any questions on this section.
Board president Joyce,
Nothing to add, and don't forget board member Pinedo.
you, board member. Pineda,
Nothing to add.
Thank you. Vice President Kirkbride.
Forgive my ignorance, but there was a comment about why 800 and 825 are not mentioned here. Are there no label requirements for those sections, or why didn't we mention those 2 here?
I checked speed Gustafson, I checked 800 after this because I was curious why we also didn't. So it's interesting, there is technically, but it's under like the transport section. So there's like labeling requirements for like transportation, disposal, kind of things like that. And so like, you know, for like all our hazardous drugs, we'll say that it's a hazardous drug must be disposed, you know, appropriately, but so you can throw it in. I am not an expert in 825, so there may be labeling requirements that I don't know. But I mean, it's fine to add them. I don't think it hurts anything.
That was my only comment. I'll let other board members ruminate on that.
Staff member Efremov, maybe we can put it up there and let the board look at it just to see. So it would be following on line 157 and adding. And it would be USP 800. It was the 11/1/2023 version. Yes, board member Kroger.
Board member Kroger, I think this is where, because USP 800 is not just for compounding.
Correct.
So to me, like if you are compounding hazardous products, then you have to follow the compounding rules and the hazardous product. So repeating it here is, in my opinion, unnecessary and could be inferred that it isn't required for non-compounded hazardous drugs, and you don't want that happening either.
Fair enough. That sounds like an hard. Sure. Vice President Kirkbride, does that satisfy removing it in your perspective?
I don't feel one way or the other about it. I was just bringing it up. That sounds great.
And just like a
Board member Kroger seems passionate about it, so I'll say yes.
Good, so for the record, for the public, the rationale for 800 not being listed in here is that it applies to other divisions and practice settings, and 825 is radio farm, so that has its own section of nuclear pharmacy for us. Going around the room still, Board Member Patel.
Yeah, no, nothing to it. Thank you.
Board Member Smith.
Board Member Smith, nothing to add.
All right, sounds great. We will move to the next section then. Is our final section. Get to it. All right, so this is 855-183-0030 pharmacy compounding for veterinarian non-food producing animals. So for this section, staff has not proposed any changes yet and wanted to bring forth a policy discussion for the board. To remember, the intent here is to permit what is called office use or non-patient specific compounding for medications for veterinarian use. We scroll up about the comment that we received. So the policy discussion, does the board want to consider adding? Does the board want to consider adding the requirement that drugs provided to a veterinarian under these conditions must be labeled not for resale per comments received by the public? Comments received suggested specifying that this could not be for resale or limiting this to a condition where the product could not be resold by the veterinarian, similar to 503B outsourcing pharmacy regulations. Under Section 503B of the FD&C Act, 503B outsourcing facilities must include not for resale on their labels if a compounded drug is not for a specific patient prescription, such as for office use. This requirement ensures that compounded drugs, which are exempt from FDA approval, are not used in commercial wholesaling. Since we have no jurisdiction over veterinarians and what they do when they receive a drug, staff is asking the board if you would like to include a requirement to the label of the products to be not for resale to make that clear and incorporating that into request of modifications to these rules. And we have Board Member Chin starting us off.
This is Board Member Chin with no expertise in any of that, but if it is something that makes sense to the rest of it, I'm perfectly fine with it.
Thank you, Board Member Hall.
Member Hall, I kind of wanted more input from veterinarian pharmacists specifically, but it's hard to tell in the comments who it was really coming from for some of them. Also, parent to deliver directly to the licensed veterinarian or their office. I saw a comment about, if their office is like on the farm, could we put like place of work?
And the staff member from off, I think the clarification there is it can go to the vet or their office. So it could be wherever the vet is if the vet is in the field. So that should be encompassed or incorporated currently. Any further thoughts, Board Member?
Board Member Hall, it seems fine to add not for resale.
Board Member Pineda, what are your thoughts?
Board Member Pino, I have nothing to add.
Board President Joyce?
Is it Joyce? No, I like it. I like it being there, so.
Sorry, like adding. the
Yeah, I like it,
resale
yeah, adding it there,
potentially?
yeah.
Okay, we can go around and see if that's consensus and we can draft some language potentially. For Vice President Kirkbride?
Yeah, I think I don't have an issue with adding that. I also had a question about the comment, and I don't know if this is the same comment. I was looking in the comments to see. There was a comment about unlicensed veterinarians, and I wasn't sure what exactly they were getting at or what the reference was or what part we were missing. I wasn't sure if others had their insight on that, or maybe Bree, if you caught that and what they were. Do you take into consideration the Veterinary Practice Act regarding unlicensed veterinarians? But I didn't know what that meant.
Member Efremov, I do not, and the way this is written is only for licensed veterinarians.
Right.
So those individuals were not contemplated currently.
I guess the answer is no, we did not take into consideration I practice act for unlicensed veterinarian.
I've never heard of such a thing.
Well, this is board member Chen. If there is such a thing, we don't have a licensed veterinarian as opposed to an unlicensed veterinarian. If that is in the veterinarian rules, just as a point of thing.
So that was my only other note from this section. I'm fine with the resale piece if that is helpful and that's a concern if we need to label not for resale. I am cognizant that anytime you are adding a labeling requirement, you are adding cost to an entity, you know, real estate on labels is finite. And so anytime you are adding more requirements for labeling, that's adding cost and time. So if there's a need for that and a purpose that is helping this group, I support that. But I don't want to add extra requirements that are not helpful.
Thank you.
This is me, Gustafson. So current industry standards, so there are specific documents which have not gone through lawmaking, you know, processes, but the general way this is enforced right now. So my only concern with the not for resale is right now the allowance is that they can send it like home with the patient. So like the concern I think you're gonna get from vets if you do that is like, okay, so you're rural, you have a sick animal. You don't want to just give them one dose of the antibiotic, right? Like they're not gonna be able to get that antibiotic instantly or that life-saving medication. They're gonna need like multiple day supply. So are you gonna make that person then get another prescription somewhere else and hope it arrives in time? So like, I know this is what has come up before from the vets was that they want to be able to give the whole course of therapy if needed. And that is within, assuming you meet all the like requirements for the kind of office stock, there is an allowance for dispensing and sending home, which is very different from the human like 503B restrictions, which do say not for resale, must be administered in office. So there isn't the expectation that this has to be administered directly by the vet traditionally. So if you add that in, you will create more of a restriction. I do think you're going to get quite a bit of pushback on that. So, which is fine. And you can open that up if you want that in comments, but I do think you will get like a decent amount. And based on my experience, because I do dispense compounded, I don't do any office stock. But we do run into this frequently where we struggle to get the med to that animal fast enough, especially when they're dying. So I do want some avenue where, especially in rural situations, they have access to this in a timely manner. So.
Do you have further thoughts?
Thank you. Definitely, if it becomes an access issue, then I would not support adding an additional requirement on the label. Thank you.
Patel?
Member Patel, yeah, I would not add more words. And if it's become an issue, then we can revisit that one.
Member Smith?
Board Member Smith, yeah, kind of going with the consensus. I don't want to add not for resale if it causes more barriers to care. Thank you.
Member Kroger?
Board member Kroger, I'm not in favor of adding not for resale. Please keep that off.
Thank you. And I'll go back to board member Chin.
Adding,
Board member Hall.
Oh, yeah, no adding.
And board member Pinedo. Sorry, board member Pinedo. Board President Joyce.
Board President, yeah, that's fine after that information provided.
Okay.
Not adding it.
Any other discussion on this section of rules? All right, all that is remaining then is the definitions, which you already went through and looked at above, and we did the same one change to the definitions. That is compounding, just the definition of compounding, but we will need to update. Did we update anything on this? Yes, we updated the reconstituting part. Rachel, if we can, before we'll add that component that was up in the previous definitions.
Yeah, I'll do that.
And
offline.
then just to orient everyone again, what's left below is for Division 43 would be the dispensing practitioner drug outlets, the correctional facilities, and then the proposal to strike all of old 45. And I do want to ask, I guess, at this time, if the board is considering sending this to rulemaking, if you do want to go back and revisit the general section to make sure you're comfortable with those changes. I know there was some discussion about maybe coming back to these, so I really don't know kind of what the temperature is of the board. If you want to do a little more work on these before we send them to rulemaking, or if you want to finish these out and feel comfortable with them and send them to rulemaking. And maybe we could just start with board member Hall on kind of your thoughts of where we're at.
Member Hall, okay, so. Specifically section are we being asked about? 'Cause
So I guess the changes that went related to carpet, are you comfortable with that? Because I know there was some, maybe we did it a bit on the fly. So if you have any, if you're comfortable with moving that to rulemaking, or if you want more work done.
I'm comfortable with that.
Okay, and if we can scroll up, there was also some conversation that we left off on Paren 2. If you're comfortable with this at this time, or if you would like to try to do some work to get this one ready to go to rulemaking, or where we're at in your mind on that.
Member Hall, I would like to push this forward, but I do see the concern with the listed life first on there. If it's not something we can fix right away, I don't have a strong feeling about it.
And is there any other concerns you have with any other sections of the rules?
I don't have any other concerns.
You will go to board member Pinedo.
I have nothing to add.
Board member or board president Joyce.
For President Joyce, yeah, I've been comfortable about a year and a half, so, sorry. I just, yeah, I think this is as good as it gets. And you had suggested, you know, if we push this through, what we do get back. So we'll see. I'm comfortable.
Vice President Kirkbride.
I would really like to get to rulemaking today, so that's my goal, is if we have any other things that we're concerned about, that we can talk to them and fix the words. I don't think taking extra time to get more SMEs or research or whatever, it would provide any additional benefit beyond, just finalizing these words that are here, because we've had a lot of work and a lot of effort on these and a lot of time. So I'd like to get to rulemaking today.
Board member Patel. I want to push to the rulemaking, but. Or no. Go with majority on this one.
Board member Smith.
Member Smith, I kind of agreed to send it in. I think we can part more, but like, I think this is really good and I think we should support it. Thank you.
Board member Kroger.
Board Member Kruger, I think the only that would leave me kind of wanting more feedback is around the veterinary compounding, and I don't know if we can send all but that section to rulemaking and get feedback. I was just looking through some of the comments. The last thing I want to do is somehow negatively impact it like in those situations with rural areas and just stuff that I know I'm not familiar with. So, but yes, send it to rulemaking.
Okay, and staff member Mock, maybe just one other point to consider too, that this is an allotment that allows for an exception. So it allows them to do non-patient specific. So it's actually giving them a broader ability to do things than they currently have today. So having that, from what I understand from previous comments from the Vet Association, was that that would be much appreciated. But how that language come across obviously matters, and we'll make sure to include them in the rulemaking process.
Yeah, I guess. So the question would be is, so say the whole package goes to rulemaking and we get comments or information that would substantially alter that portion of the rule. Would we be able to then move part of that rule forward after rulemaking and then carve out the that portion so we could rewrite that if we needed to. Because the last thing I would want to do is get to that point and have to bring it all back,
I understand what you're saying.
right? So,
So I think that's a legal question, Stephanie Brefmoff. So if there was rulemaking and the board was comfortable with all of the sections of rules except one section, could they not move forward in making one section effective, or is it a full package deal?
I have to look at it. I'm not sure. My gut is to say to pull the one, but I need to look at the notice requirements and what we want before.
Speak of system, so I do know, so Washington, when they changed their rules to full USP, they did not create a carve out for this. Which meant I actually took over some of the Washington compounding for vet patients. And I ran into massive issues with the vet clinics that they could not get office stock. That's a huge problem for them up there. That has created a really big problem. And so what all of them have had to do is they've had to switch to 503Bs. But then they're running into issue with the 503B with the resale issue. So it gets tricky. And the vet stuff is harder because technically the federal rules are more strict than for human because they haven't been updated in a really long time, which is why a lot of these carve outs and guidance have been created because the things needed to change the federal rules are so involved, but the need is present now. And so that's why they like this has kind of existed for a while. It's just like to create access as more structure is being created. It's just going to take a long time, I think, to get there. And there's just a lot of tricky things with this. When there's drug shortages and stuff, they are not required to report it in the same way. And a lot of things that are listed in one book aren't even made anymore, and they don't have to report that either. So it's a tricky area for sure. It's definitely, you could definitely strike it, but have seen the consequence in the states that have done that. And it's hard for those veterinarians and those, animal patients for sure.
Board Member Chin?
So this is Board Member Chin. So in your expertise, what we have built as a carve out for the vets is a really good thing for that profession. And is allowing for more than they have in Washington and most likely isn't going to have. I don't see where the veterinary practices would say, no, we don't want this, or we want something different if this is more than they've had.
Speak assistant, we received a lot of comments last time
Yes.
on this vet section, like a lot. And that was a lot of where this came from, was in response to that. And I don't think there's a big concern about, these rural vets aren't going around and selling thousands of, they're not trying to create some kind of wholesale business. Like
Okay.
these vets are just trying to treat the patients that they have.
Keeping the resale off is really a great idea and I'm in favor of moving forward with rulemaking.
I think we got somewhat consensus, and I did want to just, if we can go back to that number 2, I think it was in general requirements. Speak Gustafson just pointed out that we do have this similarly listed in our 115, and in 115, it requires complete an annual self-inspection of the pharmacy using the self-inspection form provided by the board by July 1st each year and within 15 days of becoming PIC. If we modified this language to kind of reflect that, would that be better? Yeah. So could we do what? Let's see. Each drug outlet must ensure or must complete an annual self-inspection. Self-inspection says of the pharmacy using the self-inspection form, annual compounding self-inspection. I don't. Annual self-inspection. Can you just write these words, Rachel, and then we'll work with them?
Yeah.
Annual self-inspection. No, sorry, it's complete an annual self-inspection of the pharmacy using the self-inspection form provided by the board by July 1st each year and within 15 days of becoming PIC. I can't hold words in my head right now, and then maybe we can finesse this to match that.
July 1st. What was after July 1st? Sorry. Using. No, I already
Each
have
year?
this. Uh-huh.
and within 15 days of becoming PIC. So if you just do like a paragraph to like just hit enter too, so we can look at that separately. So there are two different thoughts. You just enter. Yeah. Okay, so we could add compounding self-inspection form here on, of the pharmacy using the compounding self-inspection form.
I was gonna, board member Coder, I was gonna suggest each drug outlet must complete an annual self-inspection of the pharmacy using the self-inspection form provided by the board each year, within 15 days of becoming C. In addition, the compounding self-inspection form must also be completed. Is that what that form's called? Compounding
But it's
self-inspection?
a compounding self-inspection form, yes. Is that what, does that make more sense to you?
Does to me.
Okay, and it should be each PIC, that was the other component, right? It's the PIC that must complete.
Whatever language you have other places.
Okay,
I think, or you say each drug outlet must ensure.
yeah, let's do each drug outlet must ensure, because the other ones aren't necessarily a PIC. This actually fixes the other part of that. Yes, each drug outlet must ensure completion of an annual. Vibes of an annual self-inspection.
That's PIC or drug outlet at the beginning, still not
And
right.
within 15 days of the change of PIC.
Yeah, that works. Within 15 days of the change of PIC.
Of becoming,
Yeah, change of. Change of.
get rid of becoming, 15 days of change of.
Remember, Jen, when you open a pharmacy and you're not changing, you are hiring your pick. Does that still cover that when you say change?
I think it's
It would be up becoming PIC. I hear what you're saying. We're losing that. So each drug outlet. So if we do PIC though, then we lose the others, but that's how it was. We could just say each PIC must complete an annual self-inspection of the pharmacy using the compounding self-inspection form provided by the board by July 1st of each year and within 15 days of becoming PIC. That is there? Or is that worse than what we started? Yeah, we don't need the ensure, just must complete annual self-inspection form. Self-inspection. Or do we want to use in addition to, I apologize, board member Corber, did we lose the other thought that you have?
And the next section, board member Kroger. It's just after this initial statement saying complete self-inspection and saying we're striking compounding self-inspection. Because they need to do both.
Right, so each pharmacist in charge must complete an annual self-inspection by July 1st of each year and within 15 days of becoming PIC in addition
Oh,
to.
sorry.
No, please go.
At the begin, we could say at the beginning, in addition to the annual self-inspection, each pharmacist in charge must complete the compounding self-inspection. So sorry, Rachel. It's no fun to work with me. Does that make sense for you? So we're saying, in addition to the annual self-inspection, a compounding self-inspection must be completed by July 1st of each year and within 15 days of the PIC change or whatever.
I think that is the intent. Let's see it in writing.
So say it again.
In addition
Uh-huh.
to the annual self-inspection,
To completing.
choose the annual self-inspection. assistant charge must complete an annual. Addition to the annual self-inspection. Okay, maybe it would be a good time. Could we take a 10 to 15-minute break? Staff can massage this and bring this back, and maybe we can be ready to go to.
Yeah, this is Board President Joyce. I think that's a good idea. Also, does Council Hunt have a answer for the carve out? Maybe we. No.
I'm not gonna have that, hopefully.
Oh, you-
Yeah, no.
Okay, Board Member Kirkbride, did you want to say something? Okay, yeah, let's take a 10-minute break. 40.
Joey, I need your brain. Yeah,
just use the notes that you see.
yeah, that's what we're trying to do, but I couldn't. I got lost. The final. I got like a 2-hour math focus time with my brain.